The old veteran sat alone on the edge of the ruined outpost, a rusted metal bench half buried in red sand, watching a sky that had forgotten him. His name was Harlan Voss, once a frontline soldier in the Human-Dragon War, now just another relic everyone preferred not to remember. His right leg was mechanical, his left arm stiff with old burns, and the medals on his chest stayed hidden beneath a faded coat, because wearing them felt heavier than leaving them behind. The war had ended decades ago with treaties and ceremonies, but no one ever asked the veterans how peace tasted. It tasted like dust and silence. Every year, on the same day, Harlan came to this forgotten border world where the final ceasefire had been signed, not out of loyalty to any flag, but because it was the last place where his life had still made sense. Dragons no longer flew overhead here, humans no longer marched, and the universe had moved on with impressive speed. He sat there now, hands resting on his cane, expecting nothing but the slow crawl of sunset, when the air suddenly shifted, not violently, not with the roar of war, but with a gentle pressure that made the hairs on his neck rise. He looked up, instincts older than peace snapping awake, and that was when he saw them. For small shapes emerged from behind a broken comm tower, scales catching the dying light, red, blue, gold, and obsidian, dragon children, no taller than his chest, walking awkwardly on half-folded wings like kids who hadn't yet grown into their bodies. Harlan's breath caught, memories of fire and screams flashing through his mind, but before his hand could even tighten on his cane, the smallest one stepped forward, tilted her horned head politely, and said in clear, careful common, "Mama apologizes. We're late." The words hit harder than any battlefield explosion. Harlan stared, utterly frozen, as the dragon children lined up in front of him with strange solemnity, none showing fear, none showing aggression, only purpose. You've got the wrong human," he rasped, voice rough from years of disuse, but the red-scaled boy shook his head. "No, sir. Mama said you would be here. She said you always come." That made Harlan's chest ache in a way he hadn't felt since the war. He tried to stand, failed, and sat back down heavily, eyes never leaving them. "Who's your mother?" he asked quietly, already afraid of the answer. The golden-scaled child smiled, small fangs barely visible. "The Skyburner, the Queen of Ash Peaks, the one you saved." The world tilted. Harlan remembered ash-choked skies, remembered a dragon pinned beneath collapsing stone, remembered choosing to drag her hatchlings to safety instead of finishing his mission, remembered the moment her massive eye had met his as he bled out in the snow, fully expecting death. He had survived. She had survived. And now her children stood before him like something out of a dream he didn't deserve. "She wanted to come herself?" the blue-scaled one added softly. "But the council would not allow it. Dragons are not supposed to visit humans who fought them." The obsidian-scaled child looked up at Harlan with unsettling seriousness. "But we are not bound by council shame. We are bound by debt." Harlan laughed then, a broken, disbelieving sound, as tears burned down his scarred cheeks. "I didn't do it for a debt," he said. "I just couldn't let kids die." The smallest dragon stepped closer, carefully placing a clawed hand on his knee, gentle despite the talons. "Mama says that is why you matter," she said. "She says when the world was fire, you chose kindness. And when the war ended, everyone forgot you. She did not." Harlan closed his eyes, shoulders shaking, the weight of decades of loneliness finally cracking under the simplest truth that someone had remembered. Above them, the sky darkened as massive wings beat silently through the clouds, unseen but unmistakable, and for the first time since the war, the old veteran did not feel alone on the battlefield of memory, because somewhere out there, a dragon mother was watching, and she had sent her children not as weapons, not as symbols, but as an apology, and a promise that his story was not finished yet. Harlan Voss did not sleep that night, not because of fear, but because the universe had finally remembered his name, and it felt unreal enough that he was afraid to close his eyes and wake back up alone. The 4 dragon children had settled near the ruined outpost as if it were the most natural thing in the world, curling around broken stone and old human metal, their wings folding clumsily, their tails twitching with barely contained energy, while Harlan sat on his bench watching them with the stunned quiet of a man who had buried his past and now found it breathing beside him. They spoke softly among themselves in a language that sounded like crackling embers and wind through caverns. But every so often one of them would glance at him, checking, as if to make sure he was still real. "You don't have to stay," Harlan said at last, his voice low and careful, afraid of breaking whatever fragile miracle this was. "This place isn't safe. Humans still patrol these borders." The red-scaled boy, clearly the oldest, tilted his head. "Mama said you would say that," he replied. "She also said you never ran when it mattered." Harlan snorted softly. Running wasn't an option back then. His gaze drifted to the horizon, to memories he had spent a lifetime trying not to relive. Firestorms, dragon silhouettes blotting out the sun, orders screamed through static, the smell of burning steel and flesh. "Your mother, she was my enemy," he said quietly. "So were you once. I fought dragons. Killed them." The golden-scaled child stepped closer, eyes thoughtful rather than afraid. "Mama said you never hated us," she answered. "She said you hated the war." That landed harder than any accusation ever could. Harlan swallowed, fingers tightening around his cane. "Your mother told you a lot," he murmured. The obsidian-scaled child nodded. "She tells us the story every year, about the human who bled in the snow and chose hatchlings over orders." Harlan closed his eyes, seeing it all again. The collapsing mountainside, the dragon queen trapped and roaring in fury and pain, the cave full of eggs about to be crushed, the choice that had ended his career and nearly his life. "I thought she forgot," he said. "I thought." Everyone did. The smallest dragon shook her head, curls of smoke puffing from her nostrils in something like sadness. "Dragons do not forget debts," she said. "But this was not a debt. Mama says it was a wound, and wounds leave marks." Before Harlan could respond, the ground vibrated faintly, a deep, distant thrum that his bones recognized instantly. He looked up at the darkened sky, heart pounding, every soldier instinct screaming danger. "She's here," he whispered. The children nodded. The air grew warmer, heavier, charged with ancient power as clouds parted without sound, and a massive shape descended, wings spanning the horizon, scales glowing like molten stone beneath starlight. She landed beyond the ruins with deliberate restraint, claws sinking into rock, her enormous head lowering slowly, respectfully, until her burning eyes met Harlan's. The Skyburner, the queen of Ash Peaks, his enemy, his salvation. "Harlan Voss." Her voice echoed, not as a roar but as a controlled rumble that vibrated through his chest. "You look older than when you last stood before me." Harlan laughed weakly. "That's what happens when you survive wars," he replied. Silence stretched, thick and fragile. Then the Dragon Queen did something no one in the galaxy would have believed possible. She bowed her head. Not in dominance, not in threat, in respect. "My children told you the truth," she said. "I wished to come sooner, but dragons are bound by pride and counsels and shame. Humans forget quickly. Dragons pretend they do not remember. I did neither." Harlan struggled to stand. The dragon's eye widened slightly as she saw his prosthetic leg, the scars, the weight of years etched into him. "That price was paid because of us," she said quietly. "Because of me." Harlan shook his head. "I chose it," he said. "I don't regret it." The queen studied him for a long moment, then turned her gaze to the children. "You see," she said to them, "this is why humans endure." She looked back at Harlan. "The war ended. Treaties were signed. But you were left behind. That is my failure." Her wings folded closer, lowering her massive form until she was eye level with him. "I did not come to collect a debt," she said. "I came to apologize." The words struck Harlan harder than any flame. A dragon queen apologizing to a human veteran. Not for politics, not for strategy, but for abandonment. "I don't need apologies," Harlan said hoarsely. "I just didn't think anyone remembered why it all mattered." The queen's gaze softened. "Then let me remind the galaxy," she replied. Above them, Stars glittered cold and distant. But for the first time in decades, Harlan felt warmth that had nothing to do with fire. The dragon children gathered closer to him, instinctively, as if he were part of their clutch, and in that quiet, impossible moment, an old human soldier realized that the war had taken many things from him, but it had also left behind something he never expected. A family born not of blood, but of a single choice made in the snow long ago when kindness had defied fire. By dawn, the ruined outpost no longer felt abandoned. It felt watched over, as if the universe itself had leaned closer to listen. Harlan Voss woke to warmth. Not the harsh burn of dragonfire, but a steady, living heat that seeped into his old bones and eased pains he had learned to ignore. The dragon children were curled nearby, their breathing slow and synchronized, little puffs of smoke rising with each exhale, while beyond them their mother rested like a living mountain, wings half spread in a protective arc that shielded the ruins from the cold desert wind. Harlan sat up slowly, joints protesting, and for a moment he simply stared, afraid to move, afraid the sound of his breath might shatter the fragile reality he had been granted. He had shared foxholes with soldiers, bunkers with strangers, and silence with ghosts, but he had never woken under the protection of a dragon queen. "You are awake," her voice rumbled softly, controlled and careful, as if even she feared breaking something. Harlan nodded. "Didn't think I'd sleep at all," he admitted. "Guess exhaustion finally won." The queen inclined her head slightly. "You slept because you were safe," she said. The simplicity of that statement struck him harder than expected. Safe. It had been a long time since that word applied to him. As the children stirred and stretched, wings flapping clumsily, the red-scaled one looked up at Harlan with a grin far too mischievous for something born of fire. "Mama says today is important," he announced. "She says we are going to fix a mistake." Harlan frowned. "What kind of mistake?" The Dragon Queen's gaze shifted toward the horizon, where distant human patrol craft glinted faintly in the rising sun. "A quiet one," she replied. "The kind history ignores. They did not attack the patrols. They did not hide from them either." When the first human scout ship detected the massive dragon signature and broadcast an alarm, Harlan felt old instincts surge through him. Duck, hide, prepare for the worst. But the queen did not move. She simply waited. The children gathered around Harlan instinctively, as if centuries of instinct recognized him as something worth guarding. When the patrol finally arrived, soldiers spilled out with weapons raised. Shock and fear etched across their faces as they recognized the Skyburner herself standing calmly among the ruins. "Stand down," Harlan croaked, pushing himself forward before anyone could fire. His voice was rough but familiar, carrying the weight of command even after all these years. A younger officer stared at him, confused. "Sir, this zone is restricted. Civilians are not authorized." Then recognition hit. Voss. The name rippled through the squad like a dropped weapon. "Colonel Harlan Voss?" Harlan shook his head. "Not a colonel anymore," he said. "Just an old man who didn't get left behind by the wrong people." The queen lowered her head slightly, enough to be visible but not threatening. "This human is under my protection," she said evenly. "And I am here under his." Weapons wavered. No one fired, because wars taught fear but legends taught hesitation. The officer swallowed. "Sir, command says you died." Harlan gave a tired smile. "I almost did," he replied. "Turns out I had unfinished business." News spread faster than fire ever could. A human veteran alive on the border world. Dragon children calling him family. A queen standing down armies without a single flame. Holocams arrived. Officials followed. But through it all, Harlan stayed seated on his old bench, the same rusted piece of metal he had returned to year after year, now surrounded by something he never expected. Attention that felt earned rather than demanded. "I don't want medals," he told the first delegation that approached. "I don't want speeches." The Dragon Queen's voice carried over his, calm and resonant. "Then do not give him those," she said. "Give him what you denied him." The humans hesitated. "Which is?" "A place," she answered. A name remembered without footnotes. A home that does not require silence. Harlan closed his eyes as the words settled. He had spent years convincing himself he wanted nothing. Now he realized he had simply learned how to survive without asking. The dragon children climbed onto the bench beside him, one leaning against his shoulder, another draping a wing over his back like a blanket. Cameras captured everything. The galaxy watched, and something shifted. Not loudly, not violently, but deeply. Because this was not a story of conquest or surrender, it was a story of accountability. Of enemies choosing to remember the humans who had been kind when no one was watching. Later, when the crowds thinned and the noise faded, Harlan found himself alone again with the Queen and her children as stars began to prick the sky. "You didn't have to do all this," he said quietly. "I was fine being forgotten." The Queen studied him, eyes glowing softly. "You were surviving," she corrected. "Not living." She turned her gaze to her children. "They will inherit a galaxy shaped by the stories we tell them," she said. "I refuse to let them inherit a lie where kindness goes unpaid and sacrifice is buried." The smallest dragon crawled into Harlan's lap without asking, curling there with complete trust. He stiffened at first, then relaxed, one scarred hand resting gently against warm scales. "So what happens now?" he asked. The Queen's mouth curved into something almost like a smile. "Now," she said, "you stop sitting alone." She lifted her head toward the stars. "And the galaxy learns that not all heroes burn bright in battle. Some endure quietly, and that endurance is worthy of remembrance." Harlan looked at the sky, feeling a weight lift that he had carried for decades. For the first time since the war, the memories did not hurt as much. They felt complete. And somewhere deep within him, the old soldier understood that the war had truly ended. Not with treaties or signatures, but with 4 dragon children arriving late, carrying an apology their mother had waited a lifetime to give. The galaxy did not change overnight, but it leaned, just slightly, in a direction it had never considered before, and Harlan Voss found himself at the center of that quiet shift without ever standing up from his old bench. The border outpost was rebuilt. Not into a fortress, but into a memorial that breathed, half human design and half dragon stone. A place where scorch marks were left visible on purpose and names were etched in both common and draconic, because the Queen insisted that history should be readable by all who suffered it. Harlan was offered titles, ranks restored, pensions multiplied, but he refused them gently, accepting only a small dwelling near the outpost and the right to stay where he had always returned, because roots mattered more than rewards. The Dragon Queen visited often, never with spectacle, sometimes alone, sometimes with her children who grew faster than time felt fair, their wings stretching wider, their voices deeper, but their habit of sitting beside Harlan unchanged, as if he were a fixed point the universe itself navigated by. They called him Stone Father, a name that embarrassed him until he learned it meant one who endured without breaking, and when other dragons came, curious, skeptical, even hostile at first, they watched carefully how their queen deferred to an old human with a cane, how she listened when he spoke, how her children leaned into his side as if it were the safest place in the world, and those dragons left quieter than they arrived, carrying questions no council had prepared them to ask. Human veterans began to come too, drawn by rumors they barely believed, men and women who had lost limbs, homes, years, who sat beside Harlan in silence until words became possible again. And for the first time since the war, humans and dragons shared space without negotiation or fear, only the mutual understanding of survival. When Harlan's health finally began to fail, not suddenly, not dramatically, but with the slow honesty of a body that had given everything, the Queen stayed, coiling around the dwelling without crushing it, her presence a constant warmth against the creeping cold, and when he apologized for being a burden, she answered with quiet fury that shook the ground just enough to remind the world she was still fire. On his last morning, Harlan woke with the smallest dragon. No longer small. Resting her head on his chest, her breath steady, her eyes wet but unafraid, because dragons did not fear death when it came with meaning. And as sunlight spilled across the rebuilt outpost, Harlan smiled, not because he was unafraid, but because he was finished being alone. "Tell your mother," he whispered, voice thin but certain. "She was never late." When he passed, the Queen did not roar, did not burn the sky, did not demand vengeance. She bowed her head and let the galaxy see her grieve, and that single act reshaped more hearts than any war ever had, because legends spread not of how the Skyburner destroyed worlds, but of how she remembered one human who chose kindness in the snow. Long after, when dragon children learned history, they were taught that the war did not truly end with treaties, but with an old veteran on a rusted bench and 4 dragon children who arrived late, carrying an apology that proved something the galaxy had denied for too long: that mercy, once given, never truly dies.